their pets see them, that they become happy when they haven't seen you in a while, that they bring their little toy when they want to play with you, that they grab their little leash when they want you to take you out, that they have favorite positions, that they have favorite activities, that they have an active psychological life, that they perceive the world in relatively the same way as we perceive it. That is, a world of enduring objects that play roles. The role of punisher, the role of trainer, the role of food giver, or the role of receiver. In some cases, with some animals like chimpanzees, we can go beyond trying to figure out what's inside their minds by teaching them a primitive language. Chimpanzees can be taught sign language, but they can also be taught to use colored plastic figures to express what they are seeing, or even to express what they want at any one particular point. For instance, a chimpanzee can be taught to associate a red triangle with itself, a blue triangle with a trainer, a yellow circular plastic object with a verb to give, and a red triangle, different than the blue triangle, with, say, an apple. And after you train them to associate those objects with a reference, the chimpanzee can arrange those objects to form primitive sentences like, trainer give apple chimp. In other words, give me an apple. Trainer give an apple to me. And he can also understand when the trainer organizes those figures to say, chimp give apple to trainer. Now, I'm not saying that chimpanzees can learn language as we speak it, because language as we speak it implies not only words that rigidly refer to something, implies words that can enter into complex syntactic arrangements that are not as simple as the mouse runs, but also the mouse, the cat chases, runs. In other words, complex sentences that have embedded clauses. And a chimpanzee cannot do that. A chimpanzee cannot be taught syntax. So chimpanzees don't really learn language. But nevertheless, the fact that they can learn this primitive form of language, trainer give apple chimp, to say, give me an apple, shows that they see trainers, they see apples, they can understand the action to give, that is the transfer of possession of an apple that's in the hands of a trainer to the chimpanzee, and they can form thoughts such as, I want an apple, I want the trainer to give me the apple, so I'm going to make the request, trainer give apple to chimp. So by teaching certain animals a primitive language, we can get a little bit of information about their mental or psychological states, about what they can perceive and what they can see. Now clearly there is a distinction between what bees can learn, or what ants can learn, or what cockroaches can learn, which is very, very little, and what mammals and birds can learn. Nevertheless, you can train bees to do things. Bees need to be trained. Bees don't perceive objects. Bees only perceive stimuli, odors, colors, flavors, petal-shaped forms, flower-shaped form with a certain disposition of petals. But they must learn to associate certain reflexes, like when you take a bee and you give it a little bit of sugar and put sugar in water and put it next to its antennas, the bee has a reflex in which it sticks out its tongue and begins licking the sugar in its antennas. But if in addition to giving a little bit of sugar and start the reflex of licking, you show it a green color, for instance, a green light, or you show it, or you spray some floral aroma, some perfume, every time you give it a little sugar, just like the dog from Pavlov, that was able to salivate at the sound of the bell without the odor of food. Here, after several, 15 or 16 presentations of that color with sugar, now every time you flash the color, the bee will stick out its tongue and start licking its antenna, even though there's no sugar anymore. In other words, it learns to associate the color with the licking. Why is that important? Because the bees, when they come out of their beehive, are going to have to fly towards flowers, which is where the nectar is going to be, but they won't know that there's nectar in the flower until they land in the flower and they begin eating the sugar. Throughout that flight, all they're going to see is colors. They're going to see that there's some color expanses in there around them. They are going to smell the flowers, and they are going to see multi-peaked arrangements of petals from far away, and they need to associate that visual impression, that odor, and that that smell and that particular color with the presence of sugar, the presence of nectar, so that they now all fly together and land on the same flowers as a matter of routine. In other words, even bees that don't perceive any object like dogs do or that horses do, can perceive intensities. Intensities of color, intensities of aroma, and certain geometrical arrangements of shapes. They don't perceive flowers as a whole. Their brains are not large enough to do that, but they perceive enough of those stimuli to actually help them in their daily lives. Now, the point of saying this is that different theories of perception disagree on how much our own consciousness has continuity with that of animals. There are certain theories of perception that mark a definite break with that of animals, and other theories of perception that claim that we have continuity with that of animals. The two kinds of theories can be traced back to two great philosophers. Their names are Kant, for whom there is a definite discontinuity between human perception, animal perception, and Hume. David Hume, they were both contemporaries at the end of the 18th century. They are both extremely influential even today, because basically they define the two alternative theories of perception, or theories of experience, conscious experience, that we have available to us today. For Kant, the subject, that is the ego, your psychic self, your psychological self, is defined conceptually, and the same thing about experience. Clearly, when I watch this room with you guys sitting around the room with certain number of tables and other tools and instruments laying around, I'm perceiving something that has structure. I'm not just perceiving some crazy, array of colors and shapes and so on. I'm perceiving something that has pretty much structure, and I know that if I turn around and I turn back, this thing is not going to change into something entirely different, but it's going to be pretty much the same as I did when I turned around. When something changes drastically, like in the movie Poltergeist, remember there was a scene where the mother at the beginning of the movie places the chairs next to the table, turns around, turns again, and the tables are now in a completely different position. That scares the hell out of you, because there's even a ghost in the room, or some kind of weird thing just happened, because chairs don't just like jump up and start arranging themselves, which means that we form expectations as to what things do. I can expect this scene more or less to remain the same for the rest of the class. The light is going to change a little, it's going to get a little darker outside, but basically everything will remain where it is. Experience has structure. So the question now is, subjective experience, what gives it that structure? For Kant, what gives it the structure is concepts, which ultimately boil down to linguistic concepts, that is, words. For Kant, the